Good afternoon. Pastor Dwayne here, Church Unplugged. It's Wednesday before Memorial Day weekend coming up, so we thought it would be fitting that we would do a Church Unplugged at Fort Snelling at the National Cemetery. Now, as many of you know, is that I'm retired Air Force, longtime veteran, deployed quite a few times. And with me, I want to introduce a friend of mine. This is Chaplain Scott Adkins from the Minnesota Army National Guard, a citizen soldier. He's a pastor and a part-time soldier in the Army National Guard, and he's a chaplain for that. So we want to thank you, Chaplain Adkins, for being here with us today and sharing this moment with us. As you're going to see, there's some traffic going around, so it's going to be a little loud, but we're in a very public spot, so that's going to happen. Behind us right here is the Chaplain's Memorial. It's sort of hard to see. You can see the American flag, and you can see in the background all the tombstones of our veterans who have passed, and their family. Their families are also interned here too. So one of the things a lot of people don't understand is that not everybody buried here is died in combat. Most of these are actually are airmen and soldiers and Marines and sailors and coasties who have went and served their country, came home, and as they either aged or illness or whatever, they passed on, and the country seemed fit that they needed a place to remember them as they served our country in the past. Now, this is not a glorifying war or glorifying the military or anything like that. That's not what this is for, but it is to remember those who serve their country. And it's hard to explain unless you have what it's like. But everybody here in one way or another has served their country, whether they served it directly or they had a spouse who served also, and a lot of times they served right next to them. As you can see, it's a beautiful day here. Memorial Day's coming up, and we like to remember. It's not all about barbecues. It's not all about firing up the grill in the beginning of summer. It's about remembering those who went before us. So we can remember those. But it's also a place that we can bring God into this. And because God took all these veterans and their families into his loving arms when their time come. So we do have Chaplain Adkins here. We might want to talk with him a little bit instead of me just chatting on. He's going to tell us a little bit about the history of Fort Snelling. Got a few facts. One fact that I want to bring up is that they are 9 Medal of Honor winners buried here at Fort Snelling. It's an honor to have those men or women who have served their country to the degree to where they were awarded the highest honor that we have with the Medal of Honor. But I'll let Chaplain Adkins talk to you a little bit, then I'll have a couple questions for him after that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pastor Dwayne. So like he said, I'm Chaplain Adkins with the Minnesota Army National Guard. I'm also a pastor at Bethesda Lutheran in Dresser, Wisconsin. And to answer his question, some of the things about this place is, as you might know if you've ever studied Minnesota history before, is that Fort Snelling has been around for a very long time. It was founded in 1805 and was originally a frontier fort. up and down the Mississippi River, the government planted forts to try and make sure that the vital trade routes of the Mississippi River were well defended. And Fort Snelling was one of those. Now, as time went on, Fort Snelling, wasn't originally used for its original purpose anymore. The government did retain part of it for use as a military base. There is a reserve station still here at Fort Snelling. But a large chunk of the land they decided to use as a national cemetery as Pastor Dwayne was saying, to give those who have served their country a place to to be interned when their time on earth was up. And the cemetery itself was officially formed in 1937, and that's when they had their first interments here. And it was placed under the control of the Veterans Affairs Administration. And let's see, you said there's 9 Medal of Honor winners here. And my numbers are a little old, so please forgive me, but in 2017, mind you, this is 3 years ago, there was 225,000 people buried. So it's a pretty big place. As you can see, there's tombstones behind me, is pretty much as far as the eye can see, and there's plenty. You can't see them because it's on the other side of the camera, but there's plenty in front of me too. So this is very much a sacred place. You can come here. It's quiet. It's a well-respected, well-upkept place, and it's a good place for us to reflect on everything that God has done for our nation and in the lives of each one of these people here. And so for that reason, I really do enjoy coming to Fort Snelling quite a bit. And pastors around this area, myself included, often will do burials and interments here at this place for members of our congregations and that have served in the past. So I'll bring Pastor Dwayne back. You said he had a few questions.
Got a few questions. Well, Chaplain Adkins, of course, too. I think we all know of everything going on right now with the COVID-19, and I know we had to stay at home, and some of that's changing right now. There's a lot changing going on, but I know that you live you're like me. You live on the Minnesota side, and you serve.
That's true. We sneak across the border.
We sneak across the border to serve our congregations into Wisconsin. But if you could speak to some of how being an Army chaplain, and because I think you did some of your military time recently too.
Oh yeah.
How has this stay-at-home order and the COVID-19 and all this, how has that affected how you've been doing your job as a chaplain?
Of course. So one thing to remember is that the Army National Guard, both in Minnesota and in Wisconsin, they come from all walks of life that you can find in our society. So what that means is that any problems, any issues that you see happening in our society, we're going to be seeing that in the Guard as well. And of course, this is true with the COVID-19 pandemic and all the fallout that's happened from that. And then you add on top of that the stress of some service members being called up to active duty for various reasons, whether that's a stateside deployment or service overseas. Yes, they're still sending them overseas right now. So one of the big things that's been made harder for me to do my job as a chaplain in the midst of all this is that I don't get to physically see my soldiers as much. The last 2 of our drill weekends have been distance drill weekends, and in almost 11 years in the Army, I have not once done a distance drill weekend. We're talking about working from home a lot, Monday through Friday. Well, I had to do my Army time from home also, and that was really kind of strange. Because everything was done via computer, having to try and do phone calls and everything like that. And that's all great and good if you're if your training is amenable to that. But as a chaplain, I deal with people, and it's a lot harder to deal with people when you're not actually face to face with them. Technology is great. I mean, we can do phone calls. We've been able to do video conferencing to a limited ability, but nothing can replace that face-to-face contact when I get to see my soldiers or worship with them when I lead chapel services. So that's been probably the biggest challenge to my job as an Army chaplain right now, Pastor Dwayne.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. We do appreciate that and understanding the challenges that our chaplains are out there. And as you maybe have noticed out here, some of our theme that I've been going with the Church Unplugged is finding places that people consider holy or spiritually important or to them. And of course, too, this is a place for many people that is, it's holy ground. Now, God is everywhere, of course. But there is maybe a different presence here because of the sacrifices that many of the men and women that are buried here has made. And we just remember them for that. I'm going to somewhat quote former President Carter, and when he was talking about war may be necessary, but war is evil. We're not going to say that war is good. War is an evil thing, and it's a unfortunate thing that sometimes we have to deal with. And for most of the people buried here, they volunteered to make that sacrifice to either go to war or to serve in a manner that prevented war. So we are grateful for them. Not here to glorify war at all, because we do know it's evil. It's just sometimes, unfortunately, necessary. And this weekend, remember those who have served. And it's a good time also for a prayer for those who have served, those who are serving, and those who have passed on. So this weekend, when you take that time away and spend, and hopefully some time maybe with some family, in whatever manner that you can, remember those who served. They volunteered to do a difficult task, and Jesus said that no greater friend is one that would, and I'm paraphrasing, but no greater friend is one who's willing to give up his life, or to give his life for a friend. There's no greater love than that. You have a cemetery full of people here who either did that or willing to do that. That was a great undertaking for them. So as you enjoy your Memorial Day, remember those who served. Pray for those who have friends who are no longer with us. I have several friends who are no longer with us here too. They're not buried here. They're buried in different locations. But we want to remember them during this time. And not only do we want to be solemn in their remembrance, it's also a celebration.
Of course.
Of course, there's the resurrection. You've heard that from me a few times, the resurrection in Christ. But it's also a celebration of their life. For someone who is willing to either make the sacrifice for their friend or we're willing to give that sacrifice, we should celebrate their lives and remember them in celebration and in a happy note too. Anything else you would like to add, Chaplain Atkins? Thank you so much for being here.
No problem. I'm glad I could do this.
Now,
one thing I did want to say is, like I was mentioning earlier, that we're still answering our country's call for whatever crises are going on right now. So in addition to our families dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic as well. So please remember us. remember my brothers and sisters in arms that do what you can for their families, because they're doing, they're dealing with how to keep themselves safe from this pandemic, as well as trying to do their duty to their country as well. So do everything you can to help them out as much as you can. That's and also, like Pastor Dwayne was saying, with Memorial Day, celebrate it. I want you to enjoy it as much as you can, but remember what it's actually for. It's for us to remember those who have gone before us, those who have raised their right hand and said that they were willing to sacrifice their lives for this country of ours, and just remember that. Remember them.
Well, hope you enjoyed Church Unplugged. We'll see where we end up next week. I possibly have something online, a little, along the same line. Hope you enjoy that. And remember, worship this Sunday or Saturday night or Monday morning or Tuesday afternoon or whenever you want to worship.
It's a nice thing about doing it online.
Yeah, we're gonna have online worship for you there. So remember that. Worship will be online until at least the end of the month, and we are together and planning on how we are going to phase in worship in person together. So many blessings for you. Go in peace and serve the Lord.